You are listening to the Mark Guzman Podcast Experience. Our next topic, spotting real estate scams. So this is very interesting here that and I feel like historically there's always been scams in real estate. When you're dealing with large amounts of
this is the whole reason why you've got the Department of Real Estate that regulates real estate activity.
Correct. And when you have a lot of people that spend a lot of money on very expensive products, in this case a house, you're always going to have some sort of level of scams. And so this is very interesting in where a California woman posed as a real estate agent to scam home buyers.
Yeah.
And
now, just to preface things, before we get started, when Mark and I were talking about this particular topic, we came down to two different types of scams. Ones that are clearly obvious that you should be aware of and look out for, and ones that where there might have been a sincere attempt to do right, but then things got out of control. They eventually got regulated, and then what might have been legal before is now illegal, and sometimes people think that's a scam.
So let's break that up, because the article that we're referring to is an Inman article where a California woman posed as a real estate agent.
Right. And so now this is one of those straight up scams where it's not a real estate agent pretending to be one, trying to extract cash from you.
And basically, and there's a few scams. In this case, they were trying to collect deposit money from home buyers, and then they would essentially run away with that deposit money. And deposit money can be anywhere from $5,000, and I've seen up to $20,000.
Right. Now, again, hitting the topic, how to identify real estate scams. The first thing that you want to always look out for.
Check their license.
Well, even before that, is if they ask you to pay them cash or a check directly payable to that agent's name, that's just straight up illegal. And most people don't realize that. In fact, this type of scam where this person is this person is in trouble for, it's something that's been perpetrated throughout many years. I remember like 15 years ago, there was a particular Spanish agent preying upon the Spanish community, in particular people who may not have been here completely legal. And he would say, hey, you want to buy this house? Great, let's write an offer, make the earnest money deposit payable to me, and then he'd come back to them, oh, your offer wasn't accepted, and you lost your deposit. Now, again, when these people are requesting cash paid to them directly, that's wrong. This is the reason why we have escrow companies and brokers' trust accounts, so that there's actually a registered party who is responsible for these monies being taken. So first thing to spot, if they're asking you to give them money up front, that's probably a scam. In fact, a similar issue happened about 4 weeks ago. I had a property that was about to close escrow. It was a single family home, and it was part of a 1031 exchange that we were rolling into larger multi-units. As I was walking out the door on a 4 o'clock afternoon, my transaction coordinator asked me, hey, are we renting out that property that was about to close? To which obviously a couple of things immediately made sense, which is why the appraiser came to the property and found there was no lockbox. And as it turns out, a woman had broken the lockbox, come in, started advertising in the Spanish community for this really, really cheap house to rent out. So she was getting a lot of attention, and she was asking people to make the checks payable to her. So again, if it's too good to be true and the deal looks too good, it's probably a scam.
Yeah, and then if you go to the Department of Real Estate's website, you can look up the company that they work for. You can look up the licensee number and see if they have any violations. But the main thing is to check to make sure they're properly licensed. And you want to do all this research and piece it all together to make sure you're working with someone who's reputable, especially if you've never heard of this person before.
Right. Now, that's a good segue into the other type of potential scam. And then earlier I said it may not have started out as a scam, but later it becomes an illegal act.
So what was happening is in the the Great Recession in 2008, many people were defaulting on their mortgages, and short sales became very popular, in where the seller or the seller's agent had to negotiate on behalf of the property owner.
Or more importantly, loan modifications became very prevalent.
Correct. And these loan modifications or short sales, you would have to negotiate with the bank for them to accept a lower payout amount. Now, here's the problem. There were a lot of companies that started and they knew they could not do anything, and they were essentially taking upfront fees from people to negotiate these various contracts and loans. And guess what would happen? All of a sudden, nothing would happen, and they would take the money because they were upfront fees that were paid for these services.
And just to kind of add into that, it wasn't that they always knew they couldn't do anything. Most of the time, the request or the act was sincere. So in other words, pay us upfront fees. And again, this is why you have these laws now for advance fees and how they're treated, specifically so they can pay for their hourly cost to call these banks and either negotiate a modification on a loan. But as Mark said, there were some people who they were just beyond help. There were some people who did actually get modifications, and then they paid their money to these companies as a fee or an advance fee, and they got a modification. But in most cases, people were beyond help, and that was usually because of the fact they were tied to these very poor mortgages, or what they called
subprime.
Subprime. Yeah, it's just right off the tip of my tongue. Subprime mortgages, where they lied about their income in the beginning to acquire the home, and so now that they're actually being scrutinized very heavily, they couldn't actually modify it. So in those cases, people did just lose their deposits or their upfront advance fees to the consultant that they were paying. And as a result of this and the various amounts of complaints, that type of act is now illegal unless there's actual very, very specific precautions as to how those advance fees are treated and or possibly refunded in the event that the individual is completely hopeless and cannot be helped by the person attempting to consult, whether it be for a loan modification or a short sale.